Stay. We come back to the nature of ignorance, and none is more qualified to lead us into ignorance than I. So here we go. Sri Aurobindo begins a chapter in the Life Divine, which is the 19th in Book 2. It's called Out of the Sevenfold Ignorance Towards the Sevenfold Knowledge. And he has a quote at the beginning from the Maha-Upanishad. It's the 5th section, it's the first verse there. This is the Vaishnava text. It says, 7 steps has the ground of the ignorance. 7 steps has the ground of the knowledge. It meets perfectly Sri Aurobindo's thesis in this chapter. Is ignorance simple? If it is not simple, it is complex. How complex is it? How do we know what its boundaries are? And what we must do to escape it is exactly what? How do we achieve it? How do we liberate ourselves from ignorance? So he has said, hasn't he here, that there are 7 contours to what is ignorance. But ignorance is not an accident. Let us say that there is an original being, a supreme being, infinite, without borders, without boundaries, a true being, a being which is conscious of itself, aware of its own dimensions, of its fathomless nature, and its experience of its infinite self with its infinite consciousness is an extended, irrepressible, endless ananda. You can't even say it's a wave of ananda. It is simply delight. So this is a conscious existent whose nature is delight. Sat Chit Ananda. And the concept, by the way, occurs first in theistic Vedanta. Not in Shankara's Vedanta, but in Vedanta which sees a personality, a person, as being that which constitutes the world, indwells it, and is the author of ignorance. But what is ignorance? We like to go back in our studies together to the idea that it comes from ignore, that this supreme consciousness has the power to ignore itself or to ignore part of itself. Does it ever give up its station as an absolute supreme power? A sheer awareness? No. But it is capable of manifestation. It is capable of taking its oneness and multiplying it. And in some stage of its self-manifestation, it continues to cohere as a transcendent reality, and yet holding within it all forms of manifestation. The manyness of the universe is there in principle inside that original being, but not manifest. But it can manifest, and it does manifest. Is that the first way it manifests, is through ignorance? No. Its first manifestation is as radiant knowledge, what Sri Aurobindo calls the supramental, the mahas, the vast. That is the first manifestation. That is how the conscious existent, whose nature is delight, first sees itself and expresses itself. Illimitably, distributed in a balance, oneness and manyness, all present at once. The many know the one knows all the many, and each knows each, and each knows the all, and each knows the one. It goes round and round like that in the supramental world. It's a world of sheer perfection. But there comes the idea to the divine consciousness. What if I were to manifest myself in terms of my opposite? Could I do that? Could I achieve a complete hiding of myself and then rediscover myself? And behold, this is the nature of the world. That descends into what seems to be a darkness. Some portion of the divine conscious energy ignores itself, wraps itself into an exclusive pose in which it ignores all the rest of what it is, but focuses simply on this, and allows itself to descend. This is deliberate. This is not accidental. This is not imposed on the divine. Well, who can impose anything on the divine? The divine has selected to partially represent itself. As vast as the universe seems to us, it's not even a drop of what the divine is. Not even that. But here it is big to us, and a colossal mystery. So this originating Satchit Ananda remains transcendent even when emanating this cosmos. It is not a deflection. It is purposive. It is goal-directed. Its destination, though, is supra-rational. It can't be figured out by the mind. The mind will look at it and stare at this vast mystery and find no clue. It'll build models. It'll say it's like this, it's like that. But all the models will ultimately fall and fail. Because the only thing that can penetrate this is the direct identity of the created thing with its creator, of the manifested thing with that which manifested it. So it is a mysterious power of the highest reality that encases itself through ignorance in what appears to be cosmic darkness. So we, individuals emerging in the cosmic movement, experience a double wall of self-imprisonment in the bounds of the surface ego. We don't see that which is above. We don't really see that which is around. We don't even see really what is within us. We're lost. But behind is an indivisible all-consciousness. The integration, the perfection of the Supreme Being is never lost. But the splashiness on the surface calls our attention, and so we think that's what's real. So this being is masked and compressed into divided darkness, and that's where we begin. The ascent begins cosmically towards reintegration to integrity of being and consciousness and recovered delight. That's what the cosmic movement intends to do. Along its way, it begins to reveal all the powers that are hidden within it, that we have ignored. If we're merely living in the material world, let's say matter is in a sort of a stunned state of consciousness, it has no idea that it has life inside of it. Suddenly, life emerges. Matter perhaps doesn't like it. What is all this movement about? Maybe I better kill it. But it can't, because life, by its very nature, is eternal and pushes forward to manifest more and more. And living matter wants to perceive, wants to conceive, wants to govern, wants to empower itself, wants to do stuff. And that's the mind operating in living matter. So this reach takes us from stage to stage. And of course, if we're going to talk about that, we have to talk about here come the many souls, discovering their ways in the wide worlds. And not just one world, there are many worlds. So evolution here reveals what's embedded in ignorance, what's hidden there, and unrolls it. It's the process that the cosmos permits, that the divine wills to be, that takes us back step by step, not in a straight line, in swerving lines, sometimes with big reversals, but generally moving forward. So each time we make a big jump, like when life establishes itself in matter, things are generally reconstructed. When mind manifests in life, it's reconstructed. But the process of evolution remains the same. And it would be the same even when the supramental manifests. Because what evolution does is assert a new power of being, but insists that it integrates with what was before. So each integration, each step is much more sophisticated, much richer in what it reveals than the one before it. But it has to be made real all the way to the bottom. It has to be made materially real for it to count. So we can see that this is a process of reunion, integration. Again, to integrate means to become one with. And when we make a step forward, that process of conscious growth, yoga for that person, counts for the cosmos. Yoga means to harness. We like to say that it means union. It means first to harness, like you harness horses to a chariot and it goes forward, or oxen to a cart which carries it forward. Yoga is meant to fix our consciousness, choose a direction, and go. We have a sense that we don't want to live in a divided, ignorant world, that we want to know better, do more. And to accomplish that means that we have to integrate ourselves. The integration means that we must solve the problems that ignorance provides to us. Our goal is not to simply evade ignorance, to leap out of the cosmos and leave everything unsolved and find our spiritual path to release, to freedom, to mukti, to nirvana, to blow out the transient being and be some still immobile elsewhere, but out of the cosmos, certainly. That's not the goal of the cosmos. It might be a necessary escape for one here and there, but it is not a general solution to the cosmic question. So, we have to integrate. We have to become one in ourselves. And it can't be scanty or thin or evanescent. It can't be something that allows us simply to leap out of the world again. We're not looking for salvation. Salvation, freedom we must have, in a sense, freedom from illusion, but here and now. So realization has to gather substance. A height attained must concretize itself, must become wider and deeper. And by doing this, we, on behalf of the universe, achieve an evolutionary growth into an integral knowledge, a knowledge that unifies, that untangles ignorance in every dimension and in every direction. To live on a new height, we must be liberated from our prisons. And our prisons are many. So we have to deepen, heighten, and widen. So the sevenfold ignorance, which we touched upon last time and which we've read several times in our review of the Life Divine over the years, is the original, the cosmic, the egoistic, the temporal, the psychological, the constitutional, and finally the practical. All these are different ways of seeing how ignorance is deeply enmeshed in the universe. But it's an integral knowledge that we're aiming at that will cancel the sevenfold ignorance by restoring what each level ignores and reveal what is missing. So the original ignorance is that we take the partial for the whole. We accept what we see. With our senses, we touch the world. We come to know how we feel about things, and that's the whole world to us. And it's not. Obviously, there's a universe beyond. There are other people out there. Society is why only people. Every kind of life form is a society unto itself. But we don't know that. So that's the original ignorance, and we must have a fuller knowledge before we can act wisely. The cosmic ignorance means that we accept that the mutable becoming of the apparent world is what's real, and we ignore the vast and the immobile and the unified being which is beyond. And we also ignore how that vastness may manifest in a universal form. And why a single universal form? There may be universality of being at a number of planes, but indeed, all the planes are brought back together again into one. This is the answer of the cosmologist to the questions about, are there multiple universes? However many multiple universes there are, they are all, in a sense, resolvable back to that point of origin from which they come. And if they all come from this transcendent being who is quiet and calm and whole within itself, and it throws out sparks which become universes, all those sparks have their embeddedness right there in that being, have never escaped it. So it is still one universe. All of them combined together. But can we know that with our senses, with the limited stretch of our mind, with what insight is available to us as we normally live? No. We have to do something about that. And speaking of us, the egoistic ignorance is there. The limited finite dimensions that we know of ourselves. We know a little bit of the band of our consciousness. We don't know what our cells feel about things, what the arm feels about the heart, how the emotions stand in judgment of the thoughts that we have, how the body is sick and tired of being bullied by rambunctious vital and a too strict mind. We don't know any of this, so we don't know ourselves. That egoistic limitation is a real restriction of our consciousness. We have to do something about that too. And then there's the temporal. In other words, in terms of time. We're aware of our own being as a limited life in a small field. I'm going to live for 70 years. I'm going to live here in this corner of the globe. And we don't realize that we're one in an immensity of beings, that the universe is, in a sense, sempiternal, living in a timelessness, that we, sharing that reality, are essentially eternal and immortal. Eternal in terms of the capital self, Atman. Immortal in terms of the psychic being, which individuates the supreme consciousness at the center of our heart, in the heart behind the heart. So, without that knowledge, we think that we're here just for a moment, and we panic. If we had that knowledge, then we could stretch out easily and say, what doesn't occur to me now, I will realize later. What I can't achieve today, I will realize eventually. We would have a sense of the spaciousness of existence and not fret. The psychological ignorance, we are larger in scope than we seem to be. We have a being that stretches all the way from the murky beginnings in the subconscious up to the superconscious, and then we have a centering presence within us, the psyche indeed, which is largely ignored by us. We could pay attention to it, but we get busy with outside stuff. We don't spend enough time building a pathway to be aware of it, to let its light shine into our members. And so we don't know ourselves except fitfully. Maybe people wake up for a moment somewhere in their normal human life and say, what is this magical thing in myself? And then it fades and they let it go. But if you caught it and followed that thread, you could live in its present reality always. So that's the psychological. But the constitutional, let's talk about that. That's what constitutes and directs it all, is a being that we're not aware of. It's present throughout all of this nature, but we miss it. And so in terms of the practical ignorance, we come to the true knowledge. The power and the joy are missed in our lives because we haven't practiced the reality present. So again, if we were to solve each of these, we would cancel the sevenfold ignorance by restoring the centeredness in the divine that each level has within it. And then they would, in a sense, vibrate, all of them, like a beautiful chord in music, bang, several notes all in harmony with each other. So we can see in this that there is a potential for a larger spiritual life than simply discovering the eternal self and fleeing the world. There's a solution that we can discover spiritually and provide its assistance and give it new powers here on earth now. Our central quest then has to be with the constitutional ignorance. What constitutes it? It draws our attention first. We have to make a transitional movement towards perfection to become a fully mental being, but that's not the height that we're aiming at. But we must become fully mental before we can transcend the mental. So this is Sri Aurobindo's practical genius here. We cannot accept our nature as presented by nature, as experienced by us, as a permanent status. We have to see it as a changeable, ordered being, that we can recompose our nature, that we don't have to accept it as it is, that we are an artist that can do what we wish with it, that we can manage it differently. We don't have to simply abide by the orders we were given at birth. Our DNA is not our master. Our culture is not our master. We want to be in attunement with the real master of existence. And if we can discover that truth in us, which vibrates and is connotative of that, then we can do that job. So failures will be many. We have to try. And we'll fail, especially at first, because we are trying to attune nature to a knowledge to come. And efforts which amount to tapas, to us practicing tapasya in our ordinary lives, not simply when we sit to meditate or concentrate, but that everything that we do has to be emblematic of that tapasya. That is what we're essentially trying to get. And tapasya will overcome eventually. It will win. This, as Sri Aurobindo says, is itself a first step towards liberation. To be able to try, to make a quest. One of the most important books in Savitri is, of course, The Quest. That's where it all begins for Savitri. So this effort is a means of the divine's working in us. And you can note that Sri Aurobindo was writing about this, continuing this stream of light and effort in early 1927, a couple of months after the Siddhi Day descent that we just celebrated a few days back. So he was continuing this work of transformation even after this gigantic liberation, after achieving this colossal realization. Because until the final victory is won, we're not done. The supramental had still to descend and take full grasp of the body, not simply being an influence from above that found a receptive overmental consciousness and could radiate its light through that overmind into the spheres of mind, life, and body. That's important, but it isn't the full work. He knew that. He kept working. So occasionally, he saw that the ignorance that we're beset with, which we're trying to resolve, is permitted to continue or return because of a lapsing need in humanity. Humanity needs a break. It needs to say time out. Let's stop and pause for a moment. So this happens, and in a way, we have to begin again. We have to re-energize, collect all of our energies, organize our focus, and start it up once more. But we haven't lost anything in the pause. We can use even the pause as a means of assimilation, of discovering what has been richly gathered and brought into focus. And then once everything has been put on the right shelf, then we can move forward with an organized consciousness again. So, conquering the constitutional ignorance, that's the first. And the constitutional is about how our vehicle is built, body, life, and mind. So we have to exceed our limited self-knowledge and attain a psychological solution. And this demands a spiritual liberation and a resulting change in how our system works. We have to insist upon an impact. We have to work hard to reinvent based on the new revelation that comes to us, whatever it might be, whether it's discovery of the inmost soul, the discovery of the vast Atman, the spiritual self who is all around and beyond the universe. We have to, in a sense, practically tinker with all the parts of our being with the power of this light, with the light of this power, and effect a real change. So through the effort, through the tapasya, through the ascent, climbing up and up and up, one discovers the self, spirit, the divine. with that discovered, the egoistic fixation is dissolved, and one can evolve and integralize into a new constitution. So we've dealt with the constitutional, the psychological, the egoistic. It moves on and on. We enter into the higher and the hidden parts of our nature and bring their powers to the surface and into the body, but according to the light and harmony of the soul, or with the vast reality of the timeless self, in a sense leaning into this particular point and sharing its luster with us. And with that, one resolves the compromise, which the constitutional represents between life and matter. This is how the constitutional works. I will permit you, life, to move around in me, but without too much disturbance. So here's a modicum. You get a little bit of what you want, and I get a little bit of what I want. And this moderation is what we will say constitutes existence. And no, we can't accept that. We cannot accept that formula. We have to internalize it and bring forward the inner powers and recombine, recreate all that is in our known nature. No aspect of us goes untouched or unchanged. So, rising into the higher spheres of mind comes first. We have again to become fully mental, fully psychic, before we can ascend into the upper spheres, beyond the lid of the mind, into higher mind, illumined mind, intuition over mind, and stretch into the supramental. So, to receive the supramental influence is important if we can correctly discern what it is, but our first preparation has to be to stand from inside, to rise to the peak of the mind, and be ready to leave that too, with an ascending soul that can affect the ultimate change. We would receive the supramental when the psychic harmony and the general harmony of the nature is reaching completion, reaching a kind of perfection. So as we do this, it's not simply a question of our personal ascent. It is also a question of being, in solidarity with the universe, with the cosmic. And that institutes a largeness with these lights we've discussed into the vital and the physical consciousness. So again, back to an integral self-knowledge. That's what we're looking for. That's our responsibility, is to know ourselves and free ourselves in all these 7 categories that Sri Aurobindo has discussed and identified for us, and which would, by definition, take us beyond normal mentality. We're not seeking absorption in the beyond, but the beyond is there, and we must have extensive power to act from it. The typical evolutionary action for us must be to ascend, to widen, to deepen, to integrate. That's how nature transcends herself each time a broad process demands. It is an impetus that nature feels keenly. Nature is insisting on it now and has raised to crisis points all the imperfections in the current constitution. Mind, life, and matter, however one arranges them, are not sufficient to deliver a life divine. It would take the matching soul and the descending power of the supramental to achieve that transformation. So this is what we aim at. So by looking for that kind of transcendence, which is still impactful in the immediate moment and place, we also reject the temporal ignorance by living in the immortal and the eternal qualities of the individual and universal self. So the practical ignorance fades when our self-knowledge is complete, when we know all the parts of our nature and have restored them in sort of a felicitous grasp, each with the other, whether it is the subliminal coming into the external nature, whether it's the higher power coming into the material. When all of this converges, that's when we begin to reach the harmony that Sri Aurobindo says is the basis for the divine life. So, the faulty values of the practical ignorance begin to disappear, and the true values of Satchit Ananda, existence, consciousness, and bliss, come to the fold. So, I think that's where we are with respect to analyzing with Sri Aurobindo what's the nature of the ignorance. So the takeaway for us is that if any of these questions can be answered, they're not answered by the rational mind, they're answered by the yogic spirit. The soul questing through hard work, concentrated work, to capture what are the true values, the good values, the values of beauty. Remember those things which are at the heart of the Greek civilization. This was the Greek way of understanding what are the divine opportunities of life. The good, the true, the beautiful. But they speak to universal realities. They speak to personal realities. And so, a beautiful life lived truly, with real focus and unending determination, with fierceness when necessary, with gentleness when possible. This is who we are. So, I thought that a section from Savitri might be apposite. And you know, it's not far from where we were reading last time. This is in Book 1, the Book of Beginnings. And Canto 3, the Yoga of the Soul's Release. I know. Do I ever leave this? Beginning on page 43. Life kept no more a dull and meaningless shape. In the struggle and upheaval of the world, he saw the labor of a Godhead's birth, a secret knowledge masked as ignorance. Fate covered with an unseen necessity the game of chance of an omnipotent will. A glory and a rapture and a charm, the all-blissful sat unknown within the heart. Earth's pains were the ransom of its prisoned delight. A glad communion tinged the passing hours. The days were travelers on a destined road, the nights companions of his musing spirit. A heavenly impetus quickened all his breast. The trudge of time changed to a splendid march. The divine dwarf towered to unconquered worlds. Earth grew too narrow for his victory. Once only registering the heavy tread of a blind power on human littleness, life now became a sure approach to God, existence a divine experiment, and cosmos the soul's opportunity. The world was a conception and a birth of spirit in matter into living forms, and nature bore the immortal in her womb, that she might climb through him to eternal life. His being lay down in bright immobile peace, and bathed in wells of pure spiritual light. It wandered in wide fields of wisdom self, lit by the rays of an everlasting sun. Even his body's subtle self within could raise the earthly parts towards higher things, and feel on it the breath of heavenlier air. Already it journeyed towards divinity, upbuoyed upon winged winds of rapid joy, upheld to a light it could not always hold. It left mind's distance from the truth supreme, and lost life's incapacity for bliss. All now suppressed in us began to emerge. Well, bright spirits, what a glory to see you all. Mother's Army of Light. Wow. I'm sure you're off to conquer bliss for her. So I won't stand in your way. Here in Pensacola, we'll go and sit in meditation. Oh, you're welcome to join us too, wherever you are. We'll sit for a few minutes together. And we wish you much love wherever you are, much light. Namaste, Jai Ma.